Recording in progress, and we're live. So thanks everybody for joining us today. Our agenda, we just got through the icebreakers and chatting portion. Great conversation around Halloween costumes, etc. Thank you everybody for sharing. And then we're going to have Tiffany Tay presenting today, a little bit more of an intro for her in a moment. And we also will have Q&A and discussion after her presentation and a little bit of closing before we wrap up for the evening. So Women Who Code is an inclusive community, and we're dedicated to providing an empowering experience for everyone who participates in or supports our community. Our code of conduct, we take it pretty seriously, especially when we have a little less oversight, I guess, on these virtual meetings. We try to keep an eye on the chat and make sure we monitor who comes in and don't just give our event link out to anybody. But if anything does happen, we will send out this incident report form at womenwhocode.com/code of conduct, and you can report an incident there. We don't tolerate harassment in any form, and we really are dedicated to providing that empowering experience for anyone. So please do send that out. If anything happens, we'll send the link in the chat after this portion of the presentation. Our mission is to inspire women to excel in technology careers. And our vision is a world where women are representative as technical executives, founders, venture capitalists, board members, and software engineers. We are global, so if you go to the Women Who Code global website, you can browse events from around the world. I attended a virtual event in San Francisco. You can attend from India, all over the place. There's events going on all the time, and folks that are tuning in here might share, where you're tuning in from around the world, because it's always kind of fun to see, since we're the Women Who Code Portland chapter, who all chooses to attend our events. Especially now that we're virtual, we can welcome a greater audience. So thank you for being here. Our movement, especially now as the world changes, we can be a connecting force that creates the sense of belonging while the world is being asked to isolate. We were just talking about how 52 Limited, Amanda is our representative from 52. She, Firm 52 hosted one of our events in January 2020. They were our new host at the time, and then the pandemic hit. And so we've had to pivot to virtual events, and we've thankfully been able to keep our events going and almost sort of build our community a little bit more, because we can be remote together. And I'm on my couch right now. I'm like at my home desk all day. So it's nice to just be cozy and share the space with other like-minded folks. So again, thank you for joining us today. You can follow us on Twitter, Slack, Meetup, and Medium. We'll send the links to these locations in the chat after this. And our Slack is probably the place to connect the most with everybody in our community. Although we are pretty active on Twitter and Instagram as well. And then our Meetup page is where you can find our latest events like this one. Our design study nights are every other month on Tuesdays. They're always at the same time, Tuesday from 5:30 to 7:30 Pacific. And then we are actually having a special feature next month in October on the 19th with General Assembly. So I believe it's on Learning to Code, so like a designer learning to code kind of event. So we'll send information out through that through our Meetup page, and then hopefully you can join the Slack when you have a chance. And then I'll let Amanda do a little bit of presentation on 52 Limited.
Hello. Yes, so we are a boutique creative and technology staffing firm based in Portland. We specialize in medium, mid to senior and executive level positions. But feel free to check out our postings, and also I'm super happy to connect with anybody here involved in this event. If they want job advice, have questions, want to take a look at one of our postings, I will pop my email in the chat, and feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn.
always forget how to unpause my share here. So thank you, Amanda. And yes, +1 to connecting with Amanda. She's been super helpful. She helped me get my resume started when I was looking for jobs again. Her and her whole team are really excited to help you find something that is exciting for you and a great fit with the company. So definitely recommend getting connected there if you're interested. And then without further ado, I'm going to introduce our speaker tonight, Tiffany Tay. Can everyone still see my screen if I pause the share like this? Okay, so Tiffany is a multidisciplinary designer who's had the pleasure of working with companies like Microsoft, Nike, and Kaiser Permanente in creating a breadth of digital products, platforms, and services. Her wide range of interests, both in and outside of design, help fuel her creativity and passion for developing unique experiences catered to just the right audiences. She currently works at Supply, a local design and development agency specialized in helping inspired brands evolve and grow their digital presence, products, and practice. And then I can stop my share whenever you're ready, Tiffany. Take it away.
Oh, thank you so much for that introduction. Let me see if I can find my share now.
While you do that, I'm going to get busy sending my links here. So
Great. Cool. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining me tonight. My topic today is aptly titled Leveling Up. This is a screenshot from Ciaro's music video, Level Up. I feel like she is a bit of like this badass boss bitch mentor that I really love. And I just like, I had to use her as my cover title. So just allow me that. But today I'll be talking about my continuing journey in growth, humility, and perseverance when it comes to progressing in my own career advancement. And I wanted to also talk about how I guess like folks can grow for themselves as well. So before we dive too deeply into my own personal journey in terms of career growth, I'd like to give a little bit of background information about me. We did cover this with that intro that Caitlin had gone over. But nice to meet you all. My name is Tiffany. I am a UX UI designer at Supply, a design and development shop agency here in Portland. As a side note, one of my bosses had mentioned to just let everyone know that we are currently hiring. So if you're interested or looking for a position in the space of design, feel free to reach out to me at any point. I can also drop my email in the chat afterwards as well. I graduated with a BFA in graphic design back in 2009. And since then, I've worked on a diverse range of digital experiences from mobile to web to kiosk, UX, web apps, e-com, admin interfaces, you name it. So I want to talk about what a designer's career path looks like. That includes skills, roles, and responsibilities. So essentially there are 3 levels. I'm going to start with junior level designers. I kind of equate junior designers to like a baby squirrel, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, eager to learn, hyped up, full of energy. They do need like quite a bit of guidance to grow, but you know, they're new to the game. They may have prior areas of specialty, so things that they might have picked up in college or as like a side hustle, but they also still need to round out their entire skill set through working experience in one or more areas. Like I mentioned before, they do require a decent bit of mentorship and direction from either a creative lead or a creative director to deliver on their work. Their main focus is on learning their craft, as well as how to beef up their production skills. And typically they're not client facing. Mid-level designers, I think about them sort of like service dogs, right? Dependable, tried and true problem solvers. They can plan and strategize solutions for any given assignment, but they're typically assignments that are found from predefined user requirements. They can also execute upon them. So from end to end, through strategy, concepts, as well as production work. They can pretty much do it all given a task. They don't really need too much oversight beyond normal creative direction. And they're also comfortable wearing multiple hats of user experience, user interface, and then visual design. So things like flows, holistic systems thinking, as well as brand expression. And lastly, they are now stepping into a role where they can start to clearly communicate and articulate their thinking directly to clients as well as internal teams. Senior level designers, I think of them as like an octopus or octopi. They're multidisciplinary masters of their craft. They have many legs or arms, and so they can pretty much touch upon everything with equal proficiency. So they can do everything a mid-level designer can do, as well as now's the opportunities to start stepping into roles of mentorship. So this is kind of the flip side of that relationship between a junior level and senior level designer. Now you're able to start, I guess, shepherding junior level designers on their own growth path. They can clearly communicate and speak persuasively about brand strategy, as well as tactical design execution to both internal teams and clients. They're now starting to participate in project planning as well as the execution. So again, like more of that planning strategy up front. I guess the concept or like the execution part is still important, but now we're getting into the strategy piece as well. And then they can also lead a design team or run solo with equal proficiency. So my starting point, circa late 2019, I was like in this smack dab in the middle between mid and senior level. From service dog to octopus, AKA my professional growth journey. So around late 2019, I was feeling more and more compelled to level up in my role as a designer at Supply. I was starting to reach a plateau and was starting to feel a bit complacent. I was just, craving more like meaningful change, as well as a pretty big challenge to keep me engaged. But little did I know what that desire meant for me in the coming months ahead. So this is around late 2019, just to give you that context. 2020, enter COVID life. So what did COVID life mean in terms of my career? So our studio, as well as pretty much the entire world, went into quarantine. So, work from home life, as well as all of the ups and downs with that new lifestyle ensued. To me, it kind of felt like being in this loop, kind of similar to Groundhog's Day, that movie with Bill Murray. It's like same kind of stuff, just on a different day. So trying to balance that stagnation in my career with also attempting to remain just afloat mentally, emotionally, spiritually during a whole global pandemic. Pretty sure you folks resonate with me on this. And so any notion that I was thinking about career advancement, those dreams are out the window, right? Wrong. So new beginnings. Our studio actually acquired a new client around the tail end of 2020. Can't really name names right now. We're still working with them, but just know that they are a pretty well-known fitness brand in that kind of industry. We worked with them for about a handful of months on a North Star kind of vision project. And in that process, we gained their trust as well as vote of confidence, just establishing ourselves as a trusted partner with them. During those months, I was kind of like grooming myself to kind of baby step towards more of that senior role. I grew more confident in organizing my design thinking into something more of that macro strategic view, as well as polishing my presentation skills. So I remember in the beginning, I was just always really nervous when I would like jump into these stakeholder meetings. And now it's still there. Like, I don't know if that'll ever go away, but now it feels like I can start holding my own. And with that, continued practice makes progress, not necessarily perfection. I don't believe in that bull crap. But yeah, this entire journey has been just kind of triggering like imposter syndrome. I don't know if folks resonate with that too much, but yeah, it was just this constant, yeah, just thing in my mind of like, am I doing it right? Am I doing okay? And just having to work through that mentally with myself. So after that, that handful of months, we also worked with them on more of a support role, so like a staff augmentation role. So having worked with them for another 3 months on smaller features, an opportunity finally arose itself to stretch myself in my capabilities. So this new project would be redefining their current workout library, and this workout library would be focused on surfacing content driven by user behavior, goals, as well as preferences, and then also enhancing their existing browsing experience. So kind of think of it like the Netflix or Apple TV of browsing a workout catalog. I'm going to call this project M&M. I just think it's really cute. The initial tasks and responsibilities that I had was participating in the project planning. So establishing a timeline, first of all, defining milestones and check-ins. And so this is, I have done that a little bit in the past, but this was more of like a thorough a thorough kind of creation and manifestation of what the entire project plan is going to be. I was also creating preliminary use cases as well as requirements, synthesizing raw client data. So we got documents provided by the client, like a user segment analysis, as well as brand positioning document, because they had been going through a rebranding of sorts. I also did some auditing of competitor and inspiration examples, and then synthesizing these insights from these audits, using those insights to help drive the new design and overall experience. And this is, I guess, my first official foray into leading more of a project kickoff, as well as client meetings and workshops. So I have some project assets I'd like to share. Does feel weird to have a design presentation and not be able to share anything. So in this one, this is one of the project planning timeline documents that help to kind of frame up how we want to start executing on this project here. So the planning took about a couple of weeks or so, and then the concepting, this is kind of a lie, it took much longer than, what is this, like a month and a half. We are just starting to wrap up on user testing now, but you can see we have like all these milestone check-ins. T's are for Tuesdays, so that's internal check-ins with the creative director and our internal design team, and then Wednesdays, this is W, are more client-facing meetings. We did have 3 concepts that we were planning on showing, and then the idea being that along the way we would be paring them down where we can. This one is blurry because this is still, we're under NDA with them, but I also wanted to still share the framework of everything. So analyzing those documents like the user segments and the brand positioning, trying to just wrap my mind around everything and synthesizing. So I ended up creating kind of a post-it Venn diagram of sorts, so capturing all the user traits that differ between their 2 target audiences, as well as user traits that overlap. So things like their demographics and character traits, their general likes and interests, as well as their perspectives on fitness in general. And then this is where I also started to capture both primary as well as secondary use cases for this new experience.
Can I ask super quickly?
Yeah.
Is this Miro or?
It is Miro. Yeah.
Perfect. I wanted to experiment with that.
Oh my gosh.
Great.
I highly recommend it. We've all transitioned ever since like COVID hit to like, how do we figure out how to whiteboard and have meaningful group discussions and sessions? And Miro has just been like a lifeline in all of that. Yeah, highly recommend it if you folks have it or have been wanting to try it out. Really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, for sure. This is another project asset. This is something I can share. So all of the stuff that you folks have been seeing, I also checked with our clients. So it's not too top secret. They have given us like me a thumbs up in terms of sharing this. So this is an example of a competitor audit. This product is called Tonal. It's a home gym. It was kind of like trendy since COVID hit. People were desperate to do some semblance of like fitness, but since we couldn't go to the gyms, Tonal and products like that ended up gaining widespread popularity. So for this, what I ended up doing was capturing screenshots of the main sections of the, I guess it's their app. It's a kiosk kind of experience integrated into this crazy home gym experience. And then from that, I was starting to just capture notes of things that I thought were kind of cool that they were doing, or just notable features. I also ended up creating a sitemap for them just to get a lay of the land and figure out how they were mapping out their existing workout experience. But from those notes, I ended up distilling it down to key learnings that you'll see on the left. There's a spectrum that we've got going on because I mentioned before this project was trying to tap more into like curated content. So is the content more community driven, user driven, like based on their goals and preferences, or is it more platform generated? Also capturing cues for consideration. So from these stickies, like what things did I really enjoy? What was working? Capturing that so that maybe we can kind of push on that and carry that through and creating our own library experience, as well as watch outs. Like what are they doing that isn't working very well that we want to avoid? So since it is a library experience, there are many adjacent, I guess, spaces that do a really great library experience. So this one is capturing Netflix. Similar kind of setup, capturing their screenshots of their home screen or major sections of the site. I wanted to dig into a bit of their search feature. We are not currently thinking to integrate search for this specific program, but the idea of having search when we're thinking about browsing hundreds and hundreds of workout videos is a pretty valid idea. And so again, key learnings on the left, that spectrum of content curation on the bottom left, and then cues for consideration, as well as watch outs here. So with this wealth of information, now what? So based on the audits and the user group analysis, I had a lot of like good raw stuff or data to base my designs on, but I wasn't quite certain where to start in defining and teasing apart these distinctly unique data-driven and informed concepts. So enter the creative director. It's kind of my savior. So AKA help, I'm raising the white flag, guide me to the correct path, Yoda. So working with the creative director, they helped in establishing and defining key areas of improvement and opportunity. So from those like watch outs and inspiration pieces, defining that and how we can push on that for our own library experience. They also helped in teasing apart the initial concepts into 3 distinct and separate points of view. I think looking back, I was getting stuck on like trying to integrate all of these different cool features in like the 3 concepts, and it just wasn't working. So like I mentioned before, this did go to user testing. So for the sake of user testing, what we wanted to do was create really like 3 sharpened points of view to then test against. So questions that we were asking were like, what patterns and features am I seeing across all of the examples that I'm looking at? What from these patterns and features are working well, and how can I integrate them into my own design thinking? And then which patterns and features should we be avoiding? So this is that areas of opportunity that I mentioned. So browsing library experiences, they all follow like a similar pattern. So we have like your overarching browse experience. how do I find things if I'm not coming with a specific mission? We also have like a find or refine experience through the use of search, dedicated search, or through the use of filters. This notion as well of content curation. How do I control or curate my overall experience through maybe like favoriting or bookmarking? And then this idea of evolving over time. So this platform will need to be smart enough to be able to like recommend things to me as I progress throughout my fitness journey. And then also keeping in mind just like an enhanced presentation or UX. So taking cues from like really cool web apps or things that we see on websites. How do we integrate some of these cool like design funness into this new project here? This is an artifact from actually was the client kickoff. So from this document, and again, like the stickies are blurred out just for privacy's sake, but this is all driving a content prioritization exercise that we had done. So the user researcher, another kind of like user research person, as well as there are like a couple of main client stakeholders. We all kind of work together in terms of defining what specific types of content we want to be prioritizing versus deprioritizing. That's authentic to their brand. This is more of a macro shot, and so this is actually a pretty good sneak peek into how to leverage Miro. It's this infinity board, so you can do board upon board upon board. You can see like from overall from the left, from project planning to that user group synthesis, and then the agenda for the 12th of May, and then running that through with our teams here. So what is next? You know, it's basically revising, rinse, repeat. We brought the 3 initial concepts to life via wireframes. And then I was reviewing the concepts internally as well as presenting them to the stakeholder team on a continuous basis. So again, from that project planning, hitting those milestones continuously. And along the way, we did end up paring it down to 2 concepts to test with. Continuing to revise the main concepts, like I mentioned, until they were completely dialed in. So general consensus and agreement upon the concepts across the different folks here. We did end up adding in a brand expression layer through visual designs, and then working specifically with the client's UX researcher in planning out a prototype for them to test with their users. So I did end up making like initial concept mock-ups, but then pushing that even further, so it really did feel like a web app that folks could walk through and get a sense of to use. So key learnings and takeaways. For me, it's always good to reflect. For me, this process works. So similarly, right after this, I was tasked with this smaller side project in helping a junior designer from the client's team. So it's so funny when you're like in the work, it can be really hard to take a step back and see what needs to be done in terms of strategy, but it's always nice to have kind of like an outside partner to come in and help with this. So they were struggling with how to clearly articulate their concept's point of view, kind of similar to where I was at as well, but just on a much smaller scale. They didn't have clarity on how they could improve the existing designs on the app, as they didn't necessarily define any kind of areas of opportunity or improvement prior to just jumping into concepting. I actually see this quite a bit in like junior and mid-level designers, or we're always like quick to dive just straight in because that's the fun of it. But we do just need to like think about the pre-planning and the strategy up front. So having gone through this before, we essentially applied this similar process to this situation, and it worked like a charm. So again, scratching at that, practice makes progress. So for me, with Project M&M, it was pretty challenging because we are like basically redesigning an entire app, but with this side feature, it just came so quickly. And the fact that it was a little smaller, but also because I had gone through the process before, things just moved really quickly, which was really nice. So 5 key things or keywords that I'd like to touch upon: strategize, synthesize, organize, articulate, and execute. So strategy's key, right? You don't ever really want to like do something without any kind of upfront planning or framing. So plan out your efforts before jumping straight into concepts. Capture and document as much information as possible to inform your design thinking. So synthesize from the captured information, distill things down by forming insights or hypotheses that drive your work and your thinking. Organization or organizing, that's where I was like starting to swirl in. Ask yourself if any patterns or notable features have emerged from your research. Organize your insights and findings in ways that help determine next steps. So typically for me, that goes into like concepting. Articulate. Present your work in a way that's easy to understand and graspable, but always making sure to back up your design decisions and logic based on that prior research that you had done in the previous steps. And then execute. This is like the concepting part, right? After completing all of the previous steps, now go forth and explore. Harden your thinking by fleshing out ideas that are, again, backed up by prior research. So if there's any kind of questioning or doubt, this comes in really handy when you're like dealing with presenting to stakeholders. If they are like just questioning your thinking, having all of that prior research or data that you had done before will help to make you feel kind of like a vote of confidence or trusted partner, rather than they're a little worried about that. So some additional tips. Look to real world examples when drawing inspiration for concepts. So you don't necessarily always have to start from scratch. Like a ton of, for me, like library experiences existed out there already. So it was nice to just see how folks were executing it in their own unique way. When ideating on areas of opportunity and improvement, ask yourself, what patterns am I seeing from my examples? What's working well that I can use myself as a jumping off point for concepts, as well as what can be improved upon for my own self. How can I tease my concepts apart into distinct points of view? Again, this is really important if you want to be user testing. You don't want to necessarily muddy the waters by mixing all these different perspectives. And always, previous data and research should ideally inform your concepts and your design thinking. Okay, thanks for your time. Yay.
Thank you, Tiffany. Yes, virtual claps and snaps. That was a great talk. Thank you for sharing. I'm glad you were able to share some like actual artifacts from your experience. That's definitely more powerful to like see the images and see all the hard work that went into that. We do have a few questions in the chat if you're open to those.
Totally, yeah, I am totally down for Q&A.
So let me grab these up. From Anna, we have a question wondering how large the team was working on this product and what were the roles, and were there other UX designers besides yourself?
Sure. Okay. So in terms of the size for this specific like project or feature, it was me as the designer working closely with the creative director on our team. So it was mainly the two of us. We did do like design critiques internally. So about 2 other designers that had their eyes on it as just like gut checks. And then from the client side, we were working with a UX researcher, another person who is kind of a UX researcher, but less on like the testing part and more of the brand positioning and voice part. We also worked with the UX manager as well as her as the director of experience. So it was a bigger team. There was also a project or a product owner at one point, but they were just overseeing on a higher level. So pretty diverse background. We also checked in with their tech team, but since this is so like in the realm of concept, it was more of just, again, like a gut check, like, are we designing something that's totally crazy that can't even be achievable, or can this be created in like the near or long-term future in terms of their company goals. Yeah.
Great. So then sort of related to that, was there a dedicated project manager, or were you pretty much leading the front?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I forgot. Yeah, we did have a project manager.
They're very
on
behind the
this.
scenes sometimes. That's okay.
Totally. She did help with that in terms of like planning meetings, like that's important. Coordinating with clients and whatnot. So yes, definitely a project manager. They are integral to the entire process. And it's unfortunate that like a good one is invisible. I hate that, but I mean,
no, I have total appreciation for it. It's like all that stuff that just like can feel like clockwork is offloaded onto a person who very much enjoys being like very punctual and helping say, hey, are you getting this done? What's the status of this? I love my project managers.
Totally.
So then with your project management style, just in terms of the tasks that are on your plate and the work that you have to get done, did you learn that on the job, or what recommendations for classes or other resources do you have?
For project planning, you mean?
Yeah, planning of any sort.
Yeah, I think that is just learned through experience, and everybody's paces are very different. I feel like if you're on a junior level, it might be hard to determine. I remember when I was a junior designer and I would be like, I can definitely do it by the end of the day. It would take me like 3 days. And so you'll just get a sense of a feel of how to plan your projects accordingly. Always put in a buffer. Like that's going to help you, a buffer time. But that's just something you pick up as you keep progressing. Yeah.
And I would say if you don't kind of keep tuning it, then people are going to start putting padding for you. I know there's one person on our team who, if they say it takes 8 hours, we're like, okay, 16.
Yeah, totally.
Which is like, it's just sort of, if you can do that yourself, extra helpful. Otherwise, your team will probably try to help you out. But it's always good to sort of almost gamify your own work, right? Like, I think I can get this done in 8 hours, like a day, but I'll see if I can get it done sooner or whatever. And
totally.
A tool question. You were using Mural. Do you have a preference between Mural or Miro, or is it like 100% Mural?
Oh my God, that's so funny because that's exactly the same situation that our client was in. They were using another workshopping kind of tool, but they were using Mural. I much prefer Miro. The fact that I think Mural has like a constrained artboard size can be really frustrating when you're working on like larger projects. So to have, it's almost like working in Sketch, but a workshopping tool in Sketch. So it's like an infinity board. You can, yeah, it's just so great. I don't personally have experience working in Mural too much, but from the brief moment that I was working with it, because we had to deliver some client workshopy bits, and so we were using their app for a bit, it did feel constrained in my experience.
I think I also misled everybody earlier. I said Mural on accident, but that's good to know because we're thinking of switching tools too, and I've heard a lot of good things about both. Sounds like I definitely like the infinity concept with like Figma and Whimsical is what we're using right now, and they both have that kind of feel, which is that's how my mind works, is it's limitless.
Sure.
So why would you put walls around me?
For sure. Yeah. Well, they also have like cool integrations or features. You can hook things in like Confluence or Jira as well. They have a pretty cool feature set. Very
cool. Definitely have some folks that I know working with Jira as well. Let's see. I kind of went out of order to make sure the conversation was flowing, and I got lost track of which questions I had. So Daria also wanted to know if you could speak a little bit more on your 3 points of view.
3 points of view. Okay, as a description without being overly descriptive. Okay, sure. So the first concept was one in which we wanted to provide users with a dedicated like home screen where they where like the user-based like content would be surfaced. So things like I mentioned, evolving over time. So like if you love doing a ton of HIIT workouts, now we're starting to recommend a ton of HIIT workouts for you. If you favorited a trainer, surfacing that trainer's content, but then balancing that with a dedicated section to also browse. So it's like equal weights of user curation, as well as I think, as the client had put it, I don't need all of this extraneous stuff. Just let me get into my workout content. The second concept was more riffing off of like your like expected browsing experience. So it was just, think about it like Netflix for workouts. So it was more of a journey in that sense. You were encouraged as a user to explore all of that content. And rather than having that dedicated browse section, it is up to you to like start diving deeper and deeper to get to that specific workout that you want to key into. The third concept we did end up dropping. It was basically a very slight tweak to their existing experience. And so we wanted to provide like safe option in case they like, didn't feel like pushing it, middle of the range, and then like one that was really pushing the boundaries and was very different from their current experience. And so I like doing that just to provide that range. Generally, if you're testing, seeing what's working and what's not, like if, folks really love the current experience, definitely you don't want to throw that away. But, if there's like new, really cool stuff or features that you want to start pushing on, like that's a great time to do that.
Yeah, seize the day. Sort of on the line of collaboration, specifically with your client, what was it like to collaborate with your client so closely?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like at this point, it doesn't really even feel like a client anymore. I feel like we're so embedded into their team, sometimes in unhealthy ways, like I will admit that. But they are just really cool to work with. I don't know if that's happens all the time with all the clients that people work with, but just being super communicative, open, transparent. And again, like I mentioned, like having data and research to back up your design thinking, it's always going to help them. Like it's going to show them that you're not just coming up with bullshit out of thin air. It's like, no, I did all of my research and here's what I came up with because of all of that. So we honestly have become like a really great trusted thought partner for them. Yeah.
Are they like high or low tech? Do you have a feel on that?
Well, so they are, okay. In what context?
So I know I have sort of a range. Today I was giving a training with a client who I love talking to them. There's like a sunshine kind of client. But
Okay.
I would say tab, and that wasn't browser tab to them. Like they were looking sort of all over the screen. Or earlier this morning, we explained what a radio button was. So there can be like
Okay.
sort of that low tech kind of client, or people who are just talking even faster than you can talk about your subject matter or whatever technical thing you're designing. So how
Okay.
is it? How are you dealing with those kind of different levels?
Yeah, I would say they're high tech. We were talking the same language, so it was pretty easy in that regard.
Very nice. Very nice. And we had a few questions a little bit more broad about your UX experience in general. So what are some of the biggest challenges you have faced or are facing as a UX designer?
Oh my goodness. Okay.
So many.
Yeah, honestly, am currently facing, I feel like it's still a growth process for me to like start being in this like newish position. So having to constantly work on my mind and my emotions about like, again, like imposter syndrome. That was like another light topic that I wanted to touch upon, but just like it's always in there and just working through that. That's been like, and that extends out not just in work, but like overall life. So there's that. also starting to learn about how to mentor others. That's been quite a bit of a learning for me, because everybody is so different and everyone's skills are so different. And you can label somebody like a junior, senior, mid-level designer, but they're always going to have like specialties that they're good at. Like I'm working with someone right now who's like amazing visual designer, and so we want to like tap into that skill set. The interesting challenge when I was working with their junior designer on the client side, it was like this really unique position to be kind of coaching them through, because it's not one of our team members, it's their team member. And so like that's what I meant a little bit about like almost being too close with the client's team sometimes, like the lines get blurred. But I just made sure to like treat them as like a compassionate individual who just wants to learn and grow. Yeah, like really putting myself in their shoes. Like if I were a designer at that point, like how would I want to be treated? How would I want to be led or guided? You also have to tailor it based on the person you're working with. Some people need, soft gloves. Some people need to be like super blunt and direct. But I feel like those two so far have been growth opportunities for me.
Same. And I have my
Yeah.
default mode, and that does not work with everybody.
Yeah.
So thank you for that. So we have a question that's sort of the working with designers. So how about working with developers or other more technical folks? Like, what's your process for managing that? Because it can be very different from talking to creatives or other designers. And then how do you
Totally.
manage the process of, okay, here's the design, go take it? Or is it more real time, you get engineering feedback?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This is a tricky one, because I feel like for our internal development team, we have like worked with them closely in terms of defining features and whatnot. But specifically with this client, they have a dev team that some of them I think are internal developers, but also they're working with a development vendor or partner as well. So that's like this added layer of complexity. It's been so far like a challenge to work with them, because they are on their own timeline in terms of like hitting milestones, and their technical milestones are sometimes really different from design milestones, and like how do we bridge the gap? But I'm still learning with that, especially with this client, because it's just so different from like previous processes. But communication, visibility, like sharing like what they're working on versus what we're working on, and like just like check-ins to make sure we're not missing each other's deliverables. We do have one weekly meeting with the development team, and like going through the project backlog to make sure like all of our design stuff is delivered to them in a timely manner. So there is some semblance of like sprints that we're working on. It's kind of a mixed bag, because like in a support role, we've been working both sprint based for smaller features and asks, as well as waterfall. Yeah, don't know if I quite answered that question clearly, because it's amorphous, just like our relationship with them.
A lot of different like aspects to touch on there, and we can deep dive on any one, I'm sure. So thank you for sharing that. And then you were talking about imposter syndrome, which is close to your heart. I know that was almost like the whole talk for tonight was just speaking about imposter syndrome. So what do you find to be some of the most effective antidotes to imposter syndrome? Yeah.
How would I say? It's just a little personal. Honestly, working through it with a therapist.
I love a therapist.
It really has helped me with like looking at the thoughts that I have, and I also do this for myself too when I'm alone. But like really looking at
Did she freeze?
I was wondering if my headset disconnected because mine.
No, I
has
thought
been doing
something was
that.
wrong on my end too.
Say, can't hear you, Tiffany.
Come back.
I don't have her cell, so I can't give her a call, but hopefully she comes back in a moment. I do want to just say I found out like she'll come back. I'll keep an eye on the waiting
Oh yeah,
room
she
here.
really must have crashed if the screen share stopped.
Oh no. Maybe it was like a laptop battery went unplugged or something. That has also happened. How about you, Amanda? Do you have any imposter syndrome ways of fighting it? that
Oh
work
my
for you?
gosh. As a recruiter and talking to like developers all the time.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, no, it's real. I don't know. I think I've just kind of gotten to the point where I'm like, I'm not the expert, but you are. So I'll ask you the questions. But I think it's something I still battle with every day, right? Like you can have been doing something for 10 years and it doesn't matter. Somebody else is going to still have more experience and know more than you are. I think it's just a process of like, all right, I'm here, this is where I am, and I can always learn more and I can always improve. But I've also got a lot underneath me, right? So it's kind of reminding yourself that you got this.
Hell
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry for
So-
that. My Zoom crashed for some random reason. It's like couldn't handle the imposter syndrome talk. I think freaking out.
It was like, I don't know how personal to get freeze.
Exactly. Yeah, no, exactly. But yeah, I feel like Amanda, you were talking about that as well, right?
Yeah, Kaylin asked me just because you had fallen off.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy. It's a lot of thought work, like making sure to just constantly check in with myself. Usually when I'm thinking that, I'm not breathing. And so breath work, I'm like taking shallow breaths, so then breathing deeply, sitting with it. It's emotional cleansing, like processing that, like meditation, all of the things. I feel like COVID has sometimes painfully made me realize like all the things that I need to work on. And so it's been a process to just like do that. I also listen to like personal growth kind of podcasts to help with that too. So
I know this could be like trendy or I don't know how to say it, but cliche maybe to say that stoicism is helpful for me. Like from like I have a very strong emotional reactions to things sometimes, and I've gotten a lot better about it, like just managing emotions. And like you're saying, just like breathe through it, sort of recognizing I'm reacting right now. Just sort of let's sit here for a second and why am I feeling this way? Like flip it of like, okay, they said this. It probably has nothing to do with my performance or the way they see me. It's just I'm reading it a certain way.
totally.
Give them the benefit of the doubt. Well, also like, not letting yourself be in a toxic situation where there might actually be something going wrong.
Totally,
but also
totally.
like recognizing like what you could be reacting to unnecessarily. So that could definitely be helpful. But stoicism, like there's a podcast, Stoic Coffee Break. I'll send the link for that in the chat. That one's just, they're like less than 15 minutes. And they have like a quote from like historical philosophers, and then he'll just sort of talk about the concept in layperson's terms. And I've walked away with just everyday practical advice from that as well.
Totally. Yeah, I think Ryan Holiday has a book on stoicism that was really interesting to listen to as well, or read. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it can be so challenging sometimes because as designers, it's like we are putting ourselves out there on a constant basis because it's our work, it's like our thinking, but trying not to like hold it too closely to the heart. And it's not that like if things aren't working, it's not like that's something that I keep like thinking about. It's like it's not that I'm bad. It's that maybe the thing that I like made was not necessarily hitting the mark. But like, yeah, everyone's inherent worth is 100% valid and always there. Yeah.
Snaps for that. Thank you. let me go back through. I know there was at least a big picture question about where we can find out more about you and supply.
Oh yeah. So for supply, we do have a website. Let me see if I can. Supply.com. I'll drop that in the chat here. I do have a
Alrighty.
website. I have this analogy of designers not updating their portfolios, similar to like the shoe cobbler who never has their own shoes. Like,
Yeah, a plumber, their sink's always clogged or stuff like that.
yeah. And so there, like, I do have a website. I'm happy to share it. It is woefully out of date because I'm too busy creating other experiences than my own. Yeah. But I mean, if anybody ever like wants to do like a virtual coffee chat or something, I'm always down for that. So, oh, I can also send my email
Very nice.
if you ever want to reach
Well,
out.
yes, thank you for that. And then we had one more note from Vienna. She said, she says, I had the opportunity to mentor our most recent intern. You know a lot more than you think you know. That definitely helped me. So I guess I can kind of turn into a question is, as you've been mentoring others, has that been helpful for you with imposter syndrome, or have you helped other people coach through their own experience with that?
Yeah. That's a great point. Like knowing more than one thinks they know. I feel like when I get into a space where I'm like centered and can come from like a grounded perspective, then yes, totally. Like I definitely know more than I thought I do. And that is very helpful when it comes to working with others and leading others for sure. I've definitely had like coach chats with my creative director where I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. And they're like, you'll be fine. You know, he said that exactly, like, you know more than you think you do, so for sure.
Like I've also heard what was helpful for me was like doing weekly check-ins, or like I've fallen off this habit, but it was very nice at the time I was maintaining it. Was like every week at the end of the week, I would sort of wrap up at like 4:30 with 30 minutes of sort of reflection on the week. Like what were my highlights, what were my low lights, or like lessons I learned, and just keeping track of those. And then I would keep like a Google Sheet tab for each week.
Oh, cool.
And then I was able to go look back and say, oh, that someone said a really nice thing about me, or like I learned, this was slightly not the best approach I could have used, but I learned that next time I'm going to do this. And just having like being able to look back on that specifically was like, wow, I've learned a lot. A year is actually a really long time. Who would have thought that? And just thinking of, I didn't do a full year. But thinking of how much growth happens over that time. And like, I know we're always trying to, like, a good friend of mine is like, she's working really hard on being here and not trying to be there when she's here right now, and staying ambitious while not also like forgetting the present and moving too
Totally.
fast, I guess.
I love that. Yeah, it's that like reflection piece that I love, that you're like able to do that. That's so good, because sometimes like when imposter syndrome creeps up, you can just like crack that open and be like, oh, I have evidence otherwise, to kind of negate that, or kind of, address it.
Yeah. So was there anything else that anyone wanted to ask, or anything else you wanted to bring up, Tiffany?
Yeah, I don't have anything.
All right.
Yeah, but just thank you
We
so
can
much
always
for
wrap up a
having
little
me.
early.
Yeah, it's
Yeah, thank
just
you
super
so much.
fun. Yeah, to do this. I love like I actually really enjoy like smaller groups. It's just like more casual and fun. And yeah, I myself am not like very formal or like, button up. So to just have it be like super chill, I can have a pop culture reference in there. Like,
Yeah.
perfect. It's perfect.
Yeah, super. This has been fun. I'm always glad to, to the end of a long work day. We have a 5:30 to 7:30 p.m. event for it to just be like cool, expert people, maybe not focusing so much on being like the expert for once, but just sharing like what you think is really cool and top of mind right now.
Totally. Yeah.
Having
And
these great questions.
yeah, I like, and that's something that like you reminded me, I wanted to preface, like, I don't feel like I am an expert really by any means. Like I'm always learning and humbled. And that's like touching upon that humility of like, every time I feel like I know things like a little too much, it's like, oh no, life will like balance that out. Yeah, pretty much. But that's like, yeah, you have to like, in order to grow, you have to be open to learning. And I gave it, I had a talk with some folks like a month or so ago, but this idea of like, I remember when I was just freshly out of college with a design degree, and I remember saying, dear God, thank you. I never have to learn again, because I feel like, okay, I just spent so much time like learning and absorbing.
You were.
Yeah, like it took, what is it, like 18 years of that? And I'm like, oh, I just want it to be over. But that's where I hit like a stagnant point. It's like I was just not wanting to learn.
It can be overwhelming. And I know I was like 2 years in, someone asked me for like, hey, I'm graduating, what were some resources that you got started with? And I was like, oh, let me send you a few of my favorite things. And then it ended up being this like mile-long email. And then it like somehow showed up in my inbox again, like someone replied to a really old thread or something. And I was like, I don't use half of those things anymore. And like a third of those things aren't even relevant. So it's like, especially in tech and like UX, it's changing so rapidly. So even if you do get to the point where you're like Miro, 110%, no surprises here, I'll get it done and lickety split. But then someone acquires Miro and all the controls change or something, it's just gonna like, there's always gonna be some new tool or some different way of doing it, which is where like also the mentorship comes in. It's like new people can always teach you something and whatever the new generations are doing. Important to have like a diversity of perspectives and all that. So it could be a whole other topic, I guess.
Oh my gosh, for sure. Like the ever-changing landscape of like, you don't, for me anyway, it feels like I not only have to like do the work, but then learn the tools to do the work, and they are constantly evolving. And so there's like 3 different apps out there that all kind of do the same thing in a different way, but it gets the job done. Like there's like Figma and Sketch and Adobe XD, and like, oh my gosh, it can be pretty overwhelming sometimes.
Yeah. To say nothing of development work where they're like, React, Angular, Vue, which I don't even, there are so many languages, and then you're like graduating a boot camp and you're like, yeah, I know JavaScript. And then they're like, okay, what about all this other stuff that you don't know yet? And you're like, I'm sorry. That's just what's on the job description. So anyhow, we can wrap up a little early unless anybody has any last questions.
Well, real quick, I do. I almost put this in the chat. When you were just talking about all this change, I feel sometimes, I'm just going to erase this then. I feel sometimes like we're expected to learn so many skills, including like project management, that used to be careers. Like you'd have a project manager, but now they expect you to have project management. So, I wonder what your thoughts are on that in terms of like having things valued and keeping up to date, but not having your skills keep on diminishing.
Totally. Yeah, totally. I feel like unicorns do exist, but like they are so far and few in between. And I feel like if you're good at design, like focus on that. Maybe you can take some trainings and whatnot, but like to have an expectation that you are also doing 2 roles, like they have project managers as a dedicated role. So like that's actually when we were when I started to get into that support role, I was doing quite a bit of that project management stuff, and I just got so overwhelmed. I was never able to like meaningfully complete my work, or I would have to like work overtime or something to complete my work because I was so bogged down with all this other stuff that a person who's dedicated to doing that should ideally be doing. So to have that expectation is crazy, and you ideally would be asking for more money if that is like a hard like responsibility that you're going to be doing. I do know they have like courses out there specifically for project management. That could be something if you wanted to talk to specifically with the project manager about like what workshops or courses they took. Yeah, I don't know if there's, I think there's like a project management degree out there, but again, it's like people go to school for that. And so to have that expectation is mind boggling.
Yeah,
Well,
people get like full on the PMP certification, like project management professional, PMC. There's all so many acronyms that go along with that. I think I was interested. They actually have professional Scrum certificate
Certified
UX
Scrum Masters.
Yeah, certified Scrum
Yep.
Master, and then there's some one for like UX focus, which is really cool. I want to try that at some point whenever I have time. I
totally.
think all time. And I just also want to plus one your point about like there are unicorns and you can do these things, especially as like identifying as women. Like it's still hard to untangle that like we want to do everything and be everything because we can, we're awesome.
Yeah.
But it's so hard to like just not do everything that you can naturally. Like, yeah, you are naturally maybe extra good at like client relations because you know, stereotypically would have more like social skills or something, but that doesn't mean that you have to be the one, you know, I think that the client would appreciate a recap email or, hey, here's the notes I took, and then you're the only one that took notes. Just things that a project manager would do can just be part of being like stereotypically there's like what a lot of people in our generation might have grown up with as being female traits.
Yeah.
Should just be skills that everyone should have communication wise. So I'd say
Totally.
like plus one to like, you don't have to do all those things. If you do those things, you should ask for more money because you deserve it. And if you're in the position to recommend something like this, then like maybe you say, hey, I think our team would do really well with a project manager full time because look at all this workload that's, you know, distributed to me or is overflow for me, and trying to advocate for that full-time role if you can, if that's something that you can do in your organization.
For sure. Yeah, I mean, that's something that the client that we're working with right now is struggling with, is like we have our project manager working and overseeing their projects because they don't have a project manager. And you can just tell the difference between having one that's dedicated versus basically not. It's pretty noticeable. I do have a question actually, like what are folks here working on right now? Like, is there anything that you folks like are wanting to grow in your skill set specifically? Or, you know, something like, do you think, or even agree, I guess, with like the levels that I had outlined, like, are these feeling right? Because I know companies vary and the responsibilities and the roles that you're taking, it's very different dependent on the company. And this is just one interpretation that like my creative director had like jotted down before and talked us through. So yeah.
I also do want to say we had a few people jump off, so some of our more engaged folks have jumped off already. But if I can call you out, Azealia, I know that you just graduated from your program.
Hello.
So maybe you can speak to what you're working on.
Yeah, so Agile, first off.
Absolutely.
Like Agile down to sleep, Agile. But yeah, I did just graduate. She's right. I graduated from a UX UI design course. I was previously doing a front-end web development course. And then after multiple units and multiple months doing that, I was like, I think I'm going to do more UX UI focused stuff. And I just started an internship at a company in Berlin called Agraviro, which does AI green coffee grading, because I worked as a coffee roaster prior to this.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it was super cool. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
And then doing this, essentially it uses AI to help simplify grading coffee, which is super interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And from my experience, I mean, it sounds accurate as to the way you're describing the career, but I'm also very early on in my career as well.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I'm the baby squirrel. I'm very bright.
Those
eyed,
are
bushy
definitely
tailed.
good analogies.
Definitely 100%. I definitely agree, at least from my point of view, that I am eager to get started and eager to get going. And I definitely would say that I want guidance of, I feel like I have a lot of things that I want to learn, but like learning where those guardrails and bumpers are is so key for me. And for me as a beginner, I've been seeking out a lot of like mentorship and any opportunities and anything that I can find to grow myself. I read somewhere, rather than only developing your skills, which is something that I had previously done, it's also finding people who you can guide you and work with you and develop you. Someone at your skill level and then someone like way above your skill level, so that you can learn together. I was telling my boyfriend, who's currently playing games, I don't know if you can hear him, sorry, that it kind of feels like it's patchworking things together to create the start of this journey. So I just to answer if I feel it's accurate, I think so, I hope so. It looked to be from my perspective, but I'm still pretty early on in my career in learning where to go and who to talk to and how to do it. Because like a lot of the things that you talked about for like later on career stuff in like presenting meetings and talking to people and getting those kind of other skills as well, I would say from at least prior career for me and working in coffee and teaching about coffee and the interactions between people and how they have, I'm comfortable talking in front of people. So I have no problem being like, hey, talk about it. Like, okay, cool, let's talk. But like the design stuff is like more difficult for me. So I would also agree with everybody has different skill sets and like where they're comfortable and where they're not. That probably, I don't know if that answered that question. But hopefully it did.
Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. Well, for you, Ajali, like what are you looking for in a mentor? Like what are you looking for in a mentor? Yeah.
That's a good question.
I missed whatever happened in the past 2 seconds. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you. She asked,
Okay, I don't know.
She asked, what am
Go
I
ahead.
looking for in a mentor?
Go for it.
That's a good question. I'm looking for, well, many things. I'm mainly looking for a friend to help guide my design process of what kind of things can I do, not only in design wise, but like how to grow to be a better leader. Like my goal is to eventually work as a lead, either project designer or UX designer. I have a lot of focus on business side of things with my prior work experience. So I think I had one of the previous design meetings talked about the differences between UX and project management. So I know they're different. And I know one focuses more on like project management and the business needs with the user needs. But I guess for me, I'm looking for someone to celebrate their successes and celebrate mine and work together to grow more.
Totally.
And also just be like, hey, that looks bad.
Yep.
Hey, that's not the right way to do that, but that's fair.
Yep. Oh man. Yeah, that it can be so hard when you're working in a vacuum, you know, because you really only have yourself to talk to, and that can be very old very quick.
Yep. Getting feedback with each other and growing together, I think is so incredibly important, which is what I look for
Totally.
friends and mentorship is, can we grow each other?
Oh, totally. I feel like it is definitely a two-sided conversation. Yeah, I don't even really like think of folks as like mentoring them, more as like thought partners. That feels better to me. Mentoring like inherently feels like this weird like level thing, and
power dynamic. Yep.
Power dynamic. Yeah. And it's not like leveling up, but it's weird. It's weird. Yeah.
Yeah. That's why when you're like mentorship, I'm like, mentorship. But I'm not sure. But yeah, I would definitely agree with more partnership of how, yes, it's like, it's coming alongside someone and guiding them rather than like dragging them along up to your level.
For sure.
At least for my view.
Yeah. And I mean, I love that like in more of that like a senior role, like if working with the designer, like it helps to, they kind of give you like a gut check too. Like, is my reasoning sound? Like, because most of the time I like assume like, oh, I'm right. But like having somebody as a thought partner who like questions it, it gives you like, again, another gut check. And yeah, just because like, yeah, you have experience in years doesn't necessarily mean you're always right or right in general. So
Yeah,
for sure.
exactly. As we were talking about just age of people and like
Uh-huh.
sometimes like age in years doesn't necessarily mean maturity and experience, which I think
Totally.
can apply to like design in general as well. As like just because you've been there longer doesn't necessarily mean that you have that experience, but it could, and you could learn
Totally.
together for sure. So,
Totally. That's something that's like actually like stagnation. It's pretty common, I feel like and you know, like again, we are in a global pandemic, and trying to like push our boundaries when there's all this other crap going on is really freaking challenging. Yeah, just that sense of complacency can be pretty challenging at times. But that's also like what drove me. I just kept like getting this itch of like, I feel bored and I need something more. And yes, it's like growth is uncomfortable, but like in the long run, complacency feels even worse. Yeah.
I totally get that, and I totally agree and understand with that. With switching from going to coffee into tech, which is a completely different field, and then going from front end development and then saying, I don't know that this is right for me. Like it's an awesome field, but it's not right for me. To switching to UX, like this, just that ride and that decision and choices to not be like, okay, well, maybe I'll just stay here because I've been here this long, I've already spent this amount of time. Like just because there's time invested doesn't mean that you have to continue down that path. Which was like
Totally.
such a hard lesson to learn. And then it's like, okay, we're
Sunk
gonna keep
cost
moving forward.
fallacy.
Totally.
Yeah,
Totally.
yeah, 100%. And then like, okay, well, I've been just studying for 9 months, whereas like 18 years is obviously much longer. And I'm like, yeah, I get that. So 9 months, I'm like, okay, maybe I should just
Yeah.
not complain. But I mean,
Yeah, no, I hear you though. Yeah, I mean, I feel like that's kind of a symptom of like our society in general, where we're like very like results or oriented or driven, where like it needs to be done, it needs to be done faster, and I need to be like there already. And that's also something that I've been like learning more and more, is like just learning to enjoy the process and learning to enjoy learning. That's going to help you for sure.
yeah, I love that.
So we did have another question in the chat. If you want to hold that thought for 1 sec, Azealia. Daria wants to know from Amanda's HR recruiting perspective, what are you seeing as far as trends for what's desired with regard to skills, narrow expertise, etc.?
Well, that's a really hard question because it's so broad. I think, and I'm kind of in this weird niche place too, where I'm like working on a lot of software developers. I mean, we do get product designer positions, on occasion, but I generally like am doing hardcore developer stuff. So I think, in the scenario that you described, though, when you're talking about, interviewing for a position and they kind of threw project management in there, that like kind of gives me a red flag, right? In terms of, they're putting everything and the kitchen sink in a job description, and that happens a lot. I think that's more of a trend that I'm noticing than people wishing for specific things, is that they'll wish for all the things, right? And need to be kind of reined in, I guess, to some extent. So, I see a lot of job descriptions where we go back and say like, hey, we need your top 5 things, like hang out with these top 5 things, and then we'll see what else we can get kind of on the fringes. So yeah, it's kind of hard because it just kind of depends like position to position. But I think, a lot of it, especially with designers, is the user empathy, and that's something that's really screened for, or I've seen screened well for, is finding somebody that can design but doesn't feel like they have to always be right. They feel like they can go, they collaborate well with others and can also see a multitude of perspectives. I hope that helps.
Yeah, it does feel like brought up to mind, like jack of all trades, master of none. You're just basically diluting your skill set, like you can't all be everything all at once.
Right. I mean, and the flip side of that is none of us want to be too siloed, like, or stagnate, but we also can't. And like Kate, I think now I can't remember who was talking about this earlier, but I think that's something that happens with women in the workplace is like, oh, you can juggle all these things and pick your kids up from school. And, we can't be a generalist to that extent, but we also can't be siloed, right? Like you don't want to have the most niche job within, your organization.
Totally.
So then you're by yourself. And then we go back to the working in a vacuum thing.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So then was there a last question that you had, Azalea?
It was just asking about LinkedIn. That was all.
Oh, perfect.
So we
chat can
posted it in
handle
chat.
that.
We're good.
And then Boo, I know you're off camera, so was it no pressure, but did you have any questions for Tiffany? You've been asking some great questions in the chat. So it's up to you. Okay.
No, I'm sorry, did you talk to me?
Yeah, sorry, I may
Oh.
have mispronounced your name.
Oh yeah, no, you did. Actually said it right. So
Okay.
just want to say thank you, Tiffany and then Caitlin for hosting and also sharing tonight, which is really beneficial because I was really relating to Azalea's story when she shared about her experience as a new grad and then working on an internship. And so I'm kind of on the same boat. I recently graduated from GA, from UX design and
Congrats.
interning as well. So all the information that you guys have shared, I really take notes and then incorporated them into my work. And so really great learning experience. So just very grateful for tonight.
Wait.
Great.
Yeah.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah. Congratulations. I think if you like someone who's just starting, like, yeah, definitely think about beefing up your design skills. But like, if you can, in the background have more of that like strategic or like planning kind of mentality in the background, like that's going to help you when it comes to any kind of design decision, right? Like rather than just like, I'm going to pull things out of thin air. It's like, no, like your decisions must be rooted, ideally should be rooted in some kind of like logic or thinking to like back up your solutions and your concepts. So that's super, super helpful. Especially when you're presenting to like your managers and whatnot, like having proof of evidence that like you know what you're doing, or like at least like like the sources of what you're trying to reference. That's really helpful for sure.
Can plus one that. A couple of people I've trained, coached, I would say earlier on when they were first hired, I would say I'd see an interesting design decision and I'd say, so what was your thought process with this piece? And then they're like, I don't know, I just kind of put it there. And then that made me kind of question like what else was out there that they hadn't really thought through, that they had just kind of put there because they thought it was the right thing to do. Then it's not like you're going to have an answer for every single thing that you put in a wireframe or whatever it is. But just the more that you can, like if you ever go to UX Stack Exchange, if you Google something, like that's kind of one of the resources. UX Stack Exchange is like Stack Overflow for developers. So you can pull like a thread, a conversation from that, Nielsen Norman Group, Baymert Institute. Those are a few of the resources that I like to use a lot, and just kind of pinning that whenever if you have like a question for yourself about what design decision would I make here? Let's see what other people have done. And even if it comes up as part of like a design review, you can say that, well, at least you thought it through. There was something else that I was going to share. I'll let you know if I think of it. But I know it's always, I don't ever want to get like into arguments with anybody about designs, or some people enjoy that. Like one person actually told me that they enjoy arguments in design to like arrive at the right answer. And I don't know that that ever happens, but just having like that thought process that you go through of why, like what your inspirations were or what your resources were for making a design decision in an ambiguous situation, just showing that you at least took those extra steps to think it through yourself are impressive.
Totally. I love that. And that's kind of like what I was mentioning about like finding real world examples that live out there,
Yeah.
so that they're already doing it, which kind of means like typically it's already working-ish. I mean, you can find bad examples too, but like kind of ideally you want to find the good ones so you can take cues from what they're doing to then integrate into your own thinking. I feel like design is like highly subjective, and there really isn't one right answer. There's no the answer. Yeah, that's an interesting person that likes doing that.
I mean, I also thought that was an interesting comment to make, but I think if they were just maybe articulating something in a weird way that maybe they do enjoy collaboration and they just maybe had a few, yeah, I'm still figuring that out, but
Mhm.
sort of along that line, it can be if you're like if you're like trying to facilitate a group, or like if you're in a group where people are getting kind of argumentative, do you have any like tips for managing that? Like, has that ever happened to you where people can like be battling about a design decision at all and you need to sort of guide people out or towards a solution and saying, okay, yes, there are all these options and this is the strongest that we can all agree on? What are your kind of strategies for that?
Oh my gosh, I don't know. At least internally, I don't know if that's like across designers. I feel like I get into more of those kind of discussions with like the development team, when we're kind of arguing over like priorities of like time, specifically regarding like timeline and whatnot. It's hard to like give tips of like just stay grounded, keep breathing, like remind yourself that everybody's human, we're all people, like tapping into just like the humanity aspect of things. And yeah, being objective. It's like so easier said than done though. I know like if you're in it, it can be so hard to pull yourself back. I like the sentence, "We'll put a pin in it." That moves conversations real quick.
I love that one.
And so like if like, yeah, like a dedicated like breakout session needs to happen. That has happened before, where we like in the very beginning, especially, like we get caught up in the swirl and nothing ever gets solved. Like you go from meeting to meeting having the same discussions over and over again and it never gets solved. And so finally having a dedicated space for everybody to be heard, and speak their mind, and coming from a place of just like neutrality is really nice. Again, easier said than done. Our project manager was great at that, because when it comes to like design versus dev, like just inherently I have a bias already coming in as the designer that designed the thing and then talking about it with development. Yeah, it's a great skill to have, not just in professional life, but like every other aspect of life.
Oh yeah. I like the designer's facilitator concept of like the design sprint book, the Google Ventures group. They would say the designer's the facilitator, and then you have all your stakeholders in the room, and you're just asking the right questions. That kind of thing.
That's true. Yeah, like that. Yeah, with like strategy and workshops and whatnot, for sure. And that is something like you don't necessarily want to be too precious with your items. Like I understand, right? Like it's a part of us and we've made it. And so there is some semblance of like attachment to it, but that's something as like you get more experience with it, like nothing you make is truly precious. And ideally, you're going to be serving the needs of your users first and foremost, and then the client, in a healthy, like non-toxic way. So
That's great. Non-toxic is always the goal. All right. So I think we've had some great discussion today. So I think we can go ahead and wrap up a few minutes early and give an early night. And thank you again so much to Tiffany, so much for preparing your presentation and sharing all your experience with us. I
Yeah.
like supplies lucky to have you for sure, and all your coworkers and everything. You seem like a great fit for any team.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you so
virtual
much,
class.
everyone. Totally. Yeah, I loved it. It was super fun. Little nerve-wracking, but super fun.
Hope we weren't too scary.
No, it was great. It was so good. I loved the entire flow of the way you folks set it up. It's really nice.
Perfect. And I hope everyone here that joined today felt welcome and got their questions answered. We'll have another event in October, which is usually we would do the next one in November, but we're doing an extra one for with General Assembly. We're through, graduated actually. And we will see you all then. Keep in touch and have a great rest of your night.
Yeah, thank
you,
you. Have a good night,
everybody.
everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.